Hello, good evening, and welcome to the TNT Show. I'm John Drummond, and I'm your host for the next 60 minutes. Again, I need to repeat, as we say in other shows, thanks to you, the TNT Show and Indie Live are growing and delivering more exciting shows than ever before. If you want to know more about those shows, please go to indielive.net. You'll see all the details there. Well, this week, I need to start with an apology and then a thank you. I'm so sorry we were not able to bring you the interview with Alan Smith MP last week. I had some surgery prior to the show, the effects of which did not, unhappily, clear up in time, as was diagnosed. Well, we left it to the last minute to see if there could be some improvement. There wasn't, so we had to cancel. Apologies, of course, to Alan and to all of you who were disappointed. We hope to have Alan on in a future show. And I have to say this because I'm terribly grateful. A big thank you to all of you who got in touch to wish me well. It's much appreciated. I'm afraid to say that the condition I had was caused by having implants because of very poor dental work in the past. And it didn't go quite as straightforward as I hoped. So I actually paid for the difficulty that I had, which as a Scotsman grieves me deeply. So there we are. Your thoughts are much appreciated. Thank you. Let me just turn to the situation that we see ourselves in today and find ourselves in today. It's been another great day for British democracy. Now, sadly, there's fierce fighting continuing in Eastern Europe, which we're all too well aware of. It seems that Russia is finding it much more difficult to take over the Ukraine than they did to take over the Tory party. Thanks for joining us this evening. Tonight, we are talking to Ivan McKee, MSP, and Ivan is Minister for Business, Trade, Tourism and Enterprise. He and his colleagues have just published the Scottish Government's 10-year economic plan, and it's caused some real interest across the board. So we've got lots to talk about. We can talk about independence, we can talk about the economy, we can talk about business, so much to discuss, and we look forward to your questions. Ivan's here for a full hour, and he's taking your questions live, so go to indielive.net. There's a whole variety of ways that you can submit your questions, and we'll try and take as many as we possibly can. So, The Nation Talks. This is very much your show. We're live and we're free. So, no license, no problem. Now, to our guest. Tonight, The Nation Talks to Ivan McKee. Thanks for joining us, Ivan. How are you?
I'm good and delighted to be here, and I'm glad to hear you're getting better, John.
It's so awful when it's self-inflicted. I have to tell you. Anyway, there we are. Now, I want to ask you how you got to where you are just now, Ivan. If you can give us a condensed version, please, because you've had a very varied career and background. And it's not everyone that ends up as a minister in the Scottish Government. So a lot of people will be asking themselves, how does it happen?
That's a great question. Well, I've always been interested in politics, and I have to confess, well, it's widely known, I was involved in the Labour Party, quite active when I was a student, and for a number of years thereafter, and got very disillusioned during the Blair era and became quite disconnected from active politics. And I came back to it during the referendum campaign, almost about 10 years ago now, when I got involved with Business for Scotland. I had looked at the economics of an independent Scotland and realised that it made a tremendous amount of sense, and I got increasingly involved down that road. Now, what I'd been involved prior to that, I studied as an engineer, spent my life in manufacturing, working for different companies, then set my own business up, did a lot of international work with different companies around Europe and around the world. And was fortunate enough to have been successful at that. So I found myself in a place where I was able to contemplate a career change at that stage. After the referendum, I had the opportunity to get involved in elected politics and decided to give that a try. And again, was fortunate enough to get selected and then elected to be the MSP for Glasgow Provan in 2016. after that, I was made to given ministerial responsibility a couple of years after that. And that portfolio has been gradually expanding. They keep adding new things on for me to do, which I'm delighted about, and it now covers a significant part of the economy brief and some other work as well. So I think my background in business, my background in manufacturing has been helpful in that regard, and I'm really proud and honoured to have the responsibility I have, look forward to delivering an independent Scotland as a consequence of all the work that we're doing.
I mean, it sounds very exciting. I mean, I'm looking at some of your responsibilities here. My, oh my, bullet point after bullet point, Ivan.
Yeah.
Public sector procurement, business, industry and manufacturing, retail strategy, tourism and hospitality, life sciences, international trade and export policy, Scottish green ports, economy, national challenge competition, bankruptcy, regional economic. So, I mean, it goes on and on.
It does. Yeah. There's a lot to it. Yeah. But to be fair, I mean, it's pretty coherent and it means that when I'm doing something, I'm able to apply that more broadly across different sectors and make connections and join things up, and through other policy areas I'm involved in to support business to the most effective extent. So, to be honest, I enjoy every minute of it. It's great to really encourage and getting out, talking to businesses and others around the country. This morning I was up in St Andrews where we had the golf tourism event, and again that sector, tourism, getting back on its feet, and golf clearly a huge attractor to tourists coming to Scotland. So it was great to see the tremendous work that's happening there. So yeah, every day is a school day, as they say, and every day I learn great things about what Scottish business and industry is up to.
What is a typical day like for Ivan McKee? Is there a
great question? Yeah, I mean, we went through a period, obviously, where pretty much everything was online. Now we're moving beyond that. I would say about a bit more than half, maybe 60-70% of what I do is online. But increasingly, we've got much more happening by way of physical meetings. So I'm getting out and about pretty much every day now to visit businesses or have meetings with different stakeholders and groups. So that's good to get back out and see what's happening. But as I say, quite a lot of it's still virtual meetings, and that's a combination of things that are happening in the Parliament, but the majority of it, to be fair, is just engaging with businesses or working with Scottish Government officials on policy aspects we've got and making decisions as to how we're going to approach different challenges and problems that we're facing, and that's right across the whole range of stuff. So today, for example, I had that visit to St Andrews, which was super. I had various calls in the car going there and coming back with officials on different projects that we're working on, around about how we make government more effective, around about how we support inward investment into Scotland, how we take forward different aspects of the economic strategy. I had a really interesting session this afternoon with a group that's looking at how we can, what we need to do with Scotland's legal system to make it able to cope with digital assets, including cryptocurrencies, which is a fascinating subject and something we're obviously at the early stages of, but a lot of work happening there. So yeah, lots of different things happen every day, and I really enjoy every minute of it.
And you live in Glasgow, that's your constituency, but I assume that you spend a lot of time in Edinburgh because that's where the government is centred and that's where the Parliament is. So you must do quite a substantial amount of commuting back and forth. It's lucky the two places are quite close.
Absolutely. Although, to be honest, with virtual working that's happening with remote voting, there's quite a bit of that we do online as well. So I get through to the Parliament fairly frequently, but not as often as I used to, which means that frankly, you can get through a lot more work when you're working off a screen because you can do back-to-back meetings without the travel time. Yeah. So you do cover a lot more that way, but obviously get through to Parliament when there's important statements I need to make or questions I need to answer or debates I need to be involved in. Most of the work with government officials now is pretty much online. So the days when we would go into an office in Glasgow or Edinburgh and sit around and talk about things, 90% of that's now online, which frankly is much more efficient.
And how would you say the Scottish Government is viewed by the business community?
I think it's good, to be honest. I mean, you'll always get voices that will have issues about certain things, and that's healthy because we'll learn from that and hear what they've got to say. But the amount of engagement is extensive, be that with individual businesses, be it with industry leadership groups, which are a great forum for different sectors for us to reach out and engage with business, be it through groups like Chambers of Commerce, Federation of Small Businesses, etc., etc. So there's a huge amount of engagement happens. Myself, Kate Forbes, and other ministers are doing that day in, day out, and we will literally talk to hundreds of businesses over a period. So I think businesses appreciate that. They understand, particularly as we came through COVID, which was a very difficult situation for many sectors, hospitality, leisure, tourism in particular. They understand that there are challenges there and they're not always going to agree with us. They would always like more support, financial support. They'd always like restrictions to be lifted earlier. But I think despite those inherent tensions, the relationship is good. They know that they can come and talk to us and get a fair hearing. And they know that there's a quid pro quo. So, for example, in the Fair Work agenda that we're very strong on, businesses understand that they need to come to the table on that if they want to have conversations with us.
Where are the exciting new businesses in Scotland?
Oh, I could talk for the whole hour on that, John.
No, don't do that.
So I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. I mean, the obvious one is renewable energy. Now, there's the potential that Scotland's got there is just phenomenal. We've got 25% of Europe's offshore wind energy potential. We've got cutting-edge technology and floating offshore winds, and the scale and engineering behind these turbines is just phenomenal. 200 metres tip to tip, generating a phenomenal amount of electricity. And with the recent Scotland bidding process, where we've leased off parts of the seabed to operators to develop that potential, that's generating significant revenue for Scotland, Scottish Government. And then we've got hydrogen on the back of that, and Scotland's got huge potential there to be able to take that as a fuel of the future, use it in transport and heating, and export hydrogen to Europe and beyond. So a phenomenal opportunity there. Our life science sector, our Scottish businesses were really at the forefront of the response to COVID, and we've across a whole range of advanced therapies, precision medicine. Scotland's really leading edge. Our space sector that not a lot of people know about, but really very encouraging. More satellites in Glasgow than in anywhere else outside of California. We've got our spaceports coming online. We've got rocket manufacturers in Scotland now. A whole bunch of stuff happening on data there around about Earth observation to tackle.
Oops. Seems like Ivan has frozen. Well, no doubt he'll come back when we get a chance to reconnect there. We had a comment from Ashbury Stumble, who said, I first saw Ivan with Michelle Thompson early in the independence campaign at the Glad Cafe, courtesy of Independence Live. So Independence Live has been doing things for a long time. Oh, you're back. You froze.
I'm back. There's a slight hiccup there in the technology. So yeah, right across a phenomenal. I haven't talked about tourism and culture and events, and there's just so many sectors where Scotland really has great, genuine, world-leading capabilities. Yeah,
I want to come back and talk about entrepreneurship and how to encourage that in a second, particularly in the light of the economic plan that you and your colleagues announced this week. I mean, your critics are saying things like, well, you know, there wasn't really any effort to articulate the enormous potential that that independence would bring. And their view is that was a tremendous oversight. I know independence is mentioned in the report. I read how Kate Forbes pointed out that this is what we can do in the present circumstances, but with increased powers, and increased investment. Of course, you could do a lot more. But people are saying things like, well, the BIFAB yards are still workless. There's chaos at Ferguson Marine, and there's a lack of a comprehensive reinstatement of ferry services to Europe. And they're saying this does not inspire a culture of delivery. What's your answer to that?
Well, I think you've got to take it for what it is. It's a strategy about how we'll leverage the powers we've got to do the most for Scotland's economy. Now, what are we about? We're about independence, and we're about doing the best for Scotland. So we always maximise what we can do with the powers we've got. And in parallel with that, we're arguing for more powers up to and including, obviously, independence as quickly as possible. So this strategy, to be clear, was about what we can do with the powers we've got. And nobody would thank us if we just sat back and said we're not going to bother about doing anything until we get full independence. That isn't helpful for the cause of independence, because more people support independence if they see us doing a good job with the powers we've got, and it isn't good for Scotland's economy or workers or communities across Scotland if we are not maximising the potential of what we've got. So this strategy was very much about that. And it was very clear in the strategy that, of course, we can do more with independence. And we're also working on the prospectus for the economy in an independent Scotland, and that will be getting produced over the next few months. So that is absolutely critical piece of work, but it's a separate piece of work to what we published yesterday.
Oh, that's good. That's really interesting. So, well, you've just announced this, which is focused on a devolutionary framework. You are at the same time working on a framework, a business industrial framework for independence.
That's happening. There's regular meetings happening there with MSPs and MPs, with others within government. Scottish Government officials are now focused back on that after we've come through the COVID period, and there's quite a bit of work happening there, building up towards us producing a whole series of papers, not just on the economy, but right across every aspect of independence, what an independent Scotland would look like. So that's absolutely on in the process, and we'll be coming forward. But as I say, nobody would thank us if we just sat about all day and complained that we don't yet have independence. What they want us to do is go and do a good job with the powers we've got. And as I say, that makes more floating voters become more amenable to independence if they see us as a competent, capable government.
Yeah. We've had some questions coming in. I want to come back on entrepreneurism in a second. Please. But Callum Holland is asking, why is the Scottish Government reactive rather than proactive? Is it to maintain a grip on the narrative on independence, or just to hold on to power? Well, that's what we just rehearsed, I think, to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, we're not reactive. We are very proactive across a whole range of things. And if you look at the strategy, what we're focused there on entrepreneurship, what we're focused there on those new market opportunities that Scotland's got, how we get more of that work. And it's a challenge. I mean, we're not able to mandate that stuff. So in terms of getting work in Scottish for Scottish businesses, that's about helping them to be more competitive, helping them to be able to compete globally and then export. It's about working with developers, which we're doing through the supply chain development requirements for them to commit to spending significant amounts of money with the Scottish supply chain. There's two sides to that. We need to get them to commit that money, but we also need the supply chain to be able to ramp at scale and absorb that work. So there's a lot of work happening there right across the piece through our supply chain development program activity. So we're focused on all of that, right? There's challenges there, of course there is, but we're determined to deliver on that.
Yeah, somebody has written in to say, Jay the Cat says, hi Ivan, are you saying that independence was deliberately omitted from this new 10-year plan? I did actually say it wasn't omitted, it was there, and if you read the plan itself. Anyway.
Absolutely, not deliberately omitted, absolutely. Yeah. If I also haven't, whoever hasn't read the strategy, if you read it, it's very clear. Kate Forbes is very clear in her introductory remarks to it. Independence is what we're all about. This strategy, again, is about delivering the maximum we can with the powers we've got. Separate piece of work on what we can do with the full powers of independence. But the strategy was very clear. Our focus is on being an independent country with those extra powers of independence. Okay. We can do an awful lot more, but that doesn't mean we're going to sit and do nothing while we're moving towards that end goal.
I'm always personally slightly concerned. I mean, I spent my whole career in business. and at one time was the director of Midland Bank, bless its cotton socks, swallowed up by HSBC, like so many others, did I say it? But one of the issues that I often felt challenged by is the fact that I couldn't quite see the role of government directly in producing entrepreneurs. For me, that was a cultural thing. You know, people are either disposed to be progressive, innovative, or they weren't. And when I looked at the places where there are lots of entrepreneurs, the United States for one, that was driven by cultural imperatives. In fact, the government really didn't do much to help. It sort of said, well, you're an American. It's a free country. You go out there and do it. It's up to you. We're going to take any load off you that we can. We'll keep taxes low, blah, blah, blah. You've heard all these rationales before. But that was basically how it was. I mean, that's, you know, and it seemed to produce masses of entrepreneurs. But but the ones that didn't succeed were the ones that couldn't connect up with a capital connection. And of course, you could then say, well, of course, that's the role of, might be the role of government for somebody who's got a fantastic idea, but for whatever reason, you know, the financing sector is not willing to support it. But we, the government, will. I can see a logic in that. But it does seem to me that there is a cultural issue here.
I think there's a few things there, John. You're kind of getting to the nub of a lot of it. We don't accept it as a cultural issue, right? If you look at countries that have transformed, some of the Scandinavian countries and others, where they've managed to generate much more entrepreneurial activity as a consequence of taking a whole range of measures and generating more business activity as a consequence. If you look at Ireland, which obviously culturally is going to be very similar to Scotland, they've got a business startup rate that's far in excess of ours, more than about double ours, and their startup rate is higher than in the rest of the UK. So it's about government working in partnership with business and others. Everybody focused on delivering the same strategy and measures, and it's about strategic interventions where they make a difference. So if you look at the actions and the strategy, it's about getting more businesses and entrepreneurs to talk to school kids. It's about doing more with colleges and universities for them to have an environment where starting a business is something that's encouraged and supported. It's about the enterprise agencies supporting those businesses as they get started with guidance, support, networks, international opportunities, and where appropriate, other financial support. It's about working with international investors and taking our message to them to show them what Scotland's got to offer in terms of a pipeline of great businesses coming through that they want to come and invest here. So there's a whole lot of things that we can do as government, working with across the wider ecosystem to make that more effective. And one of the really encouraging things, I mean, Scotland's business growth startup rate has been gradually increasing over the last 10 to 15 years, which is good. We've still got a gap to the rest of the UK and to comparable countries. The startup rate amongst the 18 to 24-year-old cohort is double that of the national average. Now, that has happened. It's now the highest in the UK. In Scotland, amongst that age group, it's good news. It's a good sign for the future. And I think that's down to work of organisations like Youth Enterprise Scotland and other groups that work in that space, going out and proactively working with young people and encouraging them to set businesses up. So we can shift the dial on this, and if we've got a coherent set of actions, which I believe we do, we can make a difference over the next few years in terms of that entrepreneurial approach and get more business startup and more business growth and survival as a consequence.
I mean, that sounds very impressive. I mean, what sort of cooperation, if any, do you get from your UK counterparts?
Okay, I mean, it's variable, to be honest. There are areas where we share information, we share best practice, we can have conversations with the UK government, Welsh government, Northern Irish executive, etc. And where it makes sense, we work together on stuff. There are other areas which there's absolutely huge amounts of tension. disconnect, very different approach to tackling issues, and a lot of disagreement, and everything in between. So, I mean, to be honest, if you think about it, Scotland as a part of the UK or Scotland as an independent country, we would still have relationships with other countries. We would want to work with them where it would make sense. We'd want to learn from them and partner with them where it made sense on an equal footing. And that's our approach to this. So I'll talk to the Irish government. I'll talk to governments in Europe. I'll talk to the German lender or to Scandinavian countries. I'll talk to the UK government or the Welsh government or whatever it happens to be. And to say we look for areas where we've got common interests, we work together, and where we don't, then that's clear. So we're quite, I think, practical on that, but there are clearly many areas where we've got fundamental disagreements with the UK government, and we'll obviously highlight those, argue for our case, and position Scotland as best we can to be able to deal with the poor policies of the UK government. Brexit being the obvious one, but there are many others as well.
Are there any circumstances where you have gone to your UK counterpart and said, this is really not appropriate to Scotland, and we ask you to desist, and they have agreed?
In terms of what they do to Scotland, but there's a whole range of different approaches there. If you look at what's happened with in terms of working together in economic development, if you look at the city region deal, for example, there's been quite good cooperation there because it's been treated as a partnership of equals between UK government, Scottish government, and local government. And there's been many examples there where work through issues where there have been differences of opinion or perspective on things and reached a compromise. There's been other examples, for example, the Shared Prosperity Fund, the Levelling Up Fund, where the UK government is absolutely not engaged with us. We're very critical of that, and they've just come in and decided they're going to do things they want them to be done. And the topical example at the moment, obviously, is on Greenports, where we said to the UK government back in the summer of last year, we're not going to engage with this unless you ensure that fair work is part of it, unless you're clear about no reduction of standards, environmental standards, etc., unless you're very clear about a commitment to a pathway to net zero being absolutely central to this, unless you're clear about both governments having an equal say in the selection and monitoring of where the ports are going to be, unless you make sure that the Scottish ports are getting the same amount of funding as the ports in England. If you don't do all of those, then we're not talking to you, we're not engaging in this. They came back 3 months later and started negotiations again, and have given us pretty much everything we wanted. So that's an example where we stuck our ground, dug our heels in, and the UK government came round eventually to our way of thinking.
What's your feeling about the future of free ports?
You got to say from our perspective, well, from the UK government's perspective, they see that as a panacea. It's going to solve all the problems post Brexit. We absolutely don't buy into that. We see green ports as being one tool in the toolkit that can help us move forward with some of our agenda items. What it's going to do is allow Scottish ports to be able to compete with ports in the north of England to win that offshore renewable work. And what we didn't want to do is be in a position where ports in Teesside, Humberside, elsewhere had a material advantage over Scottish ports through investment from UK government or through other incentives, financial support from UK government to put them in a place where they're more cost competitive and winning contracts for offshore wind, for example. So what we managed to secure is, if you add it up, the £52 million the UK government is putting into Scottish ports now, plus all the financial incentives that come in the back of that, you're probably talking close to 100 million over a period of time, which is money that's coming to Scottish ports to allow them to be able to compete with ports in England for that offshore wind work that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So that's important. And a big part of this is about signalling internationally that you've got a cluster of excellence round about the advanced manufacturing that goes with those opportunities, so that when companies and investors globally are looking at this, they see that Scotland has really put a stake in the ground. We're very clear about we've got that cluster of manufacturing excellence that can compete globally. The Scottish government is absolutely behind it and is making that work for inward investors, but also very, very much for Scottish businesses that are part of those supply chains. So it's all quite joined up, and it's really important that we take all the advantage we can for Scottish businesses to be able to compete for that work.
I mean, that sounds very impressive. You were confronted with what looked like a fait accompli. You came back and said, we don't want this, we want that. You had negotiations, and now you're in a different place. But you contrast that with the levelling up arrangement, which seems to be handled really quite differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And also there was a debate on the Shared Prosperity Fund in Parliament today, and those points were clearly made. It's very interesting, and this is part of a bigger picture, I think. If you look at the UK government's approach to this from a unionist perspective, they kind of oscillate between what they call the muscular unionism, where they think if they push us about and bully us and tell us what to do, then they'll get what they want. And then on the other side, where they try to be more conciliatory, and the logic being that if we're seen to be working together, by their logic, then it means that more people would be in favour of the union. Of course, we don't see it that way. We see it as being, if we are seen to be an equal government, then it encourages more people that are on the fence on the independence question to recognise that the Scottish Government is well capable of running an independent country, more likely to vote for independence as a consequence. So it's quite interesting to watch the different reaction. And also, frankly, the UK government, we talk about it as one thing. It's a very big beast, and all the different departments within the UK government have got their own objectives and their own agendas, and they spend as much time squabbling with each other as they do disagreeing with us. And it's quite interesting when you get in about that to understand how best to play that to Scotland's advantage, which is quite helpful.
Yeah, Charles Smith is saying, Alistair Jack visited Scandinavia recently. Were you invited?
No. We go to Scandinavia on our own accord. We don't need Alistair Jack to invite us. Well, we're getting back, international visits back on track post-COVID. I haven't been on an aeroplane for 2 years now, but we're starting up later this month with international trips again. I did 22 trips in 22 months, one a month in the period before COVID. Since I've become a minister, we visited all over the place, US, China, the Middle East, and all over Europe, on promoting Scottish business for export, for inward investment, and building some really, really good government-to-government links as well with those countries.
Do you have any contact with the Scottish office?
Yeah, we do talk, and there are areas where we'll have issues that we can work together on very practical things. For example, in the space sector, I had a conversation with Ian Stewart recently, where there were some things that they could unblock from a UK government side, and some things we could unblock from our side to help get Scotland Spaceports up and running. So we kind of compare notes and work on that. There are other things, and I've had meetings with Alistair Jack that have been, frankly, yeah, I mean, won't go into too much detail, but not for the faint-hearted in terms of the robustness of our conversations, in terms of making him understand Scotland's position on certain things. So I say it does vary, but where it makes sense and it's in Scotland's interest, of course, we'll do what we can to get as much as we can out of the UK government, and where it's in Scotland's interest to stand up and make our position very clear in a very robust way, we'll absolutely do that as well.
The spaceport of which you speak, is that the one described by BBC Scotland in the far north of the UK?
Is that what you said? I missed that, sorry. Yeah, there's well, it's quite interesting. There's 7 potential spaceports across the UK, and 5 of them are in Scotland. The ones that are closest to being functional is in Solomvo in Shetland, in Hunst, and the Sutherland Spaceport on the north coast of Scotland. So both of those are moving forward quickly, and they'll be the UK's first spaceports, and we're hopeful that they'll be Europe's first spaceports as well, which is great news for Scotland.
Help us understand this. Help me understand it, Ivan, please. I associate spaceports with Florida. for good or ill, I look at Florida and I say, I can understand why there's a spaceport there. I understand why NASA works out of Florida, because it's sunny most of the time, and it's easy to attract people to go and work there. How does a spaceport work in Scotland?
Great question. First thing to recognise is that the scale of the rockets we're talking about here is not like for like. So when people think about that, they think about these huge big rocket launches, etc. What we're talking about in Scotland is about launching small satellites. And as I said before, Glasgow manufactures more small satellites than anywhere outside of California. Those satellites are mostly used for Earth observation, to do with climate change, environmental tracking, those kind of activities. And the spaceports we'll have in Scotland will be focused on launching those kind of satellites into different Earth orbits to support that kind of activity. We are, because of our geography, it's very suitable for launching into those kind of orbits, and that's one of the big advantages we've got in Scotland. So we've got the good geography for launch sites. We've got this very robust and strong satellite manufacturing base, and we've got a really good data processing, technical, digital component to this in terms of analysing the data that comes back. We've now got 2 businesses in Scotland manufacturing rockets. And we recently won, very interestingly, was a satellite manufacturer who was looking at an American company, looking at whether they were going to go to Florida or going to go to Ayrshire, and they chose to come to Ayrshire. So we're delighted about that, and they're going to be starting manufacturing, creating about 400 jobs in Ayrshire over the coming months. So it shows that Scotland can really compete on the global stage in the space sector, along with many, many other sectors.
It's very impressive. I mean, the first thing I would register is that I suspect many people watching and listening tonight have never heard of what you just said. It's completely new to them. I mean, straight off the bat.
We don't get, no surprise, we don't get a fair shout on the media getting this story across.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're here.
Absolutely.
The other thing that, I mean, I'm still not clear why the geography of Scotland is conducive to having a spaceport here. What is it?
Being further north helps.
Really?
Yeah. Mm.
Why is that?
Because of the orbits you're launching into, you can, I mean, we're too technical about it, but if you can, well, first of all, the geography in terms of getting the satellites into orbit, and then the orbit they take round the Earth is helped by being further north. Right. And also the flight paths from the north of Scotland, because you're launching over open sea to the north, which is helpful as well in terms of getting clearance, etc.
Okay, that does make sense to me. Question here from Alistair Bryan. He's asking about direct ferry services to Europe.
Yeah.
Or the creation of new ports, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast. What's your take on that?
Hugely supportive of that agenda. It's something that we actually identified in our export plan when we published that a couple of years ago. It's something we want to encourage. COVID kind of set us back on that, to be honest. But it's something I've really picked up very actively in the last few months. I've got a regular monthly meeting with the sector on how we take this agenda forward. And I've got Scottish Government officials working on what needs to be done to make it happen. We recognise that from a trade point of view, it's much easier for Scottish businesses. From a resilience point of view, it really came to the fore through Brexit and through COVID. It's something we really want to try and make happen. It's clearly, at the end of the day, down to commercial operators to decide how they want to ship product, and there's a limit to what we can do to support that and have and make it happen from that perspective. But so what we're doing is trying to understand why it doesn't happen. Is it cost purely? Is it frequency of service? Is it to do with the type of routes that are there? Is it to do with reliability of service? What's the issue? So we're doing a lot of analysis to look at different sectors, on whisky exports, on manufactured product exports, on other food products. And it's not just ports, it's airports as well. The amount of seafood from Scotland that goes by truck to Heathrow and then goes on from there, rather shipping from Scottish airports is significant. So we're looking at every opportunity to be able to get as much of that into Scottish ports and airports as possible. But as I say, if it was easy, we'd have done it by now. It's very much about understanding why it doesn't happen and then making strategic interventions to help private operators, if it's private companies at the end of the day, be persuaded that it makes more sense to ship from Scotland directly.
Yeah. Now, you report to Kate Forbes, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
And Kate is going on maternity leave soon.
She is.
So will you be stepping into her role?
That decision is still to be made. I would never be so presumptuous, and there's many, many ways that this can be handled. The First Minister will make a determination on that in due course, and she's got another 2 or 3 months.
I'm just doing my job. My job is to put you on the spot. I wanted to ask you a question, seriously. Are you in regular contact with Kate?
Oh, yeah, we talk, most days.
Would you like to extend an invitation from me to her to come on the show?
Indeed, I shall.
Good. Are you in contact with the First
Minister?
You
might need to, John, you might need to interview her in the Gaelic. I hope you're up for that. So.
Interview, yeah. Believe me, we're up for everything.
No, seriously, I will mention it to her and let her know.
Please do. And also, if you're talking to the First Minister, if you would kindly extend the same invitation to her.
Yeah. I shall endeavour to do that as well.
Please, I would appreciate that very much indeed. By the way, on a flippant note, I gather there's a news release saying that Chelsea are up for sale.
Oh, okay.
If you know of any entrepreneurs out there with £4 billion, that might be an interesting place to put it. Mind you, they would have a clear choice, Ivan. They could either buy Chelsea or fill up the car. It's up to them what they want to do. By the way, let me just add, the producers reminded me that our 100th show is coming up soon. And that would be great if the First Minister could appear on that show. I shall
endeavour to mention to her. As you can imagine, she's got a lot on her plate.
But she's got a lot on her plate, yeah. But we've got elections coming up, and it's an opportunity to reach out to a significant audience. We have people who watch this show in New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and the States, as well as throughout Europe, and at interesting times of the day and night.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Anyway, it's all down to the quality of the guests, and that's the main thing. I should add that one of our new shows is a science show with Marcus Chown, the science writer, the eminent science writer, and he's well worth catching up on if you can. It has the interesting title of "Mine's a Pint, Einstein," and he takes I think it'd be fair to say a fairly open-minded view on Scottish independence and how the business community and the scientific community would benefit. I hope I'm not traducing him here in any way, shape, or form. But when he was on the show, I got that impression that he was open-minded about how that might work. An interesting guy. If you haven't met him, if you haven't seen him on the show,
I haven't. That sounds fascinating. And yeah, you're right. Scottish Research and Development universities on scientific developments are absolutely world leading in some of the sectors, quantum photonics and others, where we've got some real phenomenal expertise, world beating expertise in those sectors that are going to be really key as we move through the 21st century. So Scotland's very well placed there, and it'd be good to get his perspective on those. Yeah.
Well, anybody can submit questions to Marcus on the show. I think I'm right, Kevin, in saying that. So if I'm not, put up a note to that effect. But again, my sense of it was he was fairly open about these things. If you had a magic wand, Ivan, and you could say, right, I could tap it on the desk right now, and there's a bunch of things that bug me, and I could get rid of them, what would they be? Give me 5 things that you would love to get rid of right now that would make
love to get rid of your life. Oh dear. In terms of my role in Scotland's economy, yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at the things that hold Scotland back, not having power over immigration is huge, right? And we see that in all kinds of scenarios. And the current scenario unfolding in Ukraine brings that to the fore, but it's really hampered Scotland's economic development. And it's very sad, frankly, from a cultural and international relations point of view, that we aren't able to do what we could do prior to Brexit. If you look at the energy side of things, the feed-in tariffs is a real barrier to Scotland's ability to be able to maximise our ability to deliver on our aspirations for renewable energy, because if people don't know, it costs far more to put energy into the UK grid if you're in the north of Scotland than it does if you're in London, for bizarre reasons that the UK government continues to do. If you
sorry, could you give us one of those bizarre reasons that would help us understand?
Well, I think the logic is that if you're closer to population centres, then it should be cheaper to put energy into the grid than if you're further away from population centres. So basically, if you're closer to London, it's far cheaper to put energy into the grid than it is if you're in the north of Scotland, which is kind of,
well, that's convenient, isn't it?
Where the energy comes from, it comes mostly from the north of Scotland. Then in terms of renewables, then of course it doesn't make any sense. Employment law, and of course, that's been an ongoing issue where we argued for it in the Smith Commission. Labour argued against it. It didn't happen as a consequence. But that would allow us to roll out fair work, real living wage, and other very important measures that at the moment we have to kind of work around different mechanisms to do through procurement and other levers that we're pulling. But if we had direct control over that, it would make things much easier for us to implement our fair work agenda, which again really helps to drive the economy. If people are getting paid a good wage, then they're going to be much more able to participate in growing Scotland's economy. So I think there's a whole range of things. So when you look at it, we don't have the ability to trade again. In the context of, obviously, if we were independent, we'd be back in Europe and not be at the mercy of UK government striking trade deals that aren't helpful for Scotland. Frankly, not helpful for the rest of the UK either in many cases, but very much harmful to Scotland's economy in terms of what they're opening up. And our say in that is very limited. So there's quite a few big ticket items there where with full powers we could do much better than we are at the moment.
I have to say, Kevin, sorry, Ivan, that what you just said is enormously interesting, and it's a great pity that this is the first time I'm hearing about some of these things. I've heard about them individually over a period of years, but collectively, in the way you just articulated it, it makes a terribly compelling case, I have to say. And I think a lot of people watching and listening will be thinking, hey, somebody ought to be saying these things, front and center, and now you may well counter by saying, look, it's down to the media, John. I do my best. I spell it out. If people choose
say these things every day, John. Yeah,
I'm sure you do. But what it does do, frankly, is to underscore the importance of shows like this and programs like Indie Live, because otherwise we wouldn't have heard what you just said.
Very much. There
are hundreds and thousands of people watching this tonight and watching the repeats on YouTube, who will be learning this for the very first time.
Yeah.
For the very first time. And that's, I have to tell you, I think that's scandalous. I really do. Because it's important for people in making decisions to understand how these decisions are taken or can't be taken. Mm-hmm. Because what it does do, if people don't know the background that you've just explained, it encourages people to feel that, well, the Scottish government's just not being dynamic enough, not assertive enough, etc. And that's almost a direct result of people saying, well, these things need addressed. How come? We've had questions tonight about drug policy. I didn't really want to get into it because I didn't think it was your bailiwick or your remit. But they're saying things like, why doesn't the Scottish government do this? And these are all fair points. They're very fair.
Well, that's another example. I mean, we're obviously looking at safe consumption rooms and so on and so forth, which is all reserve policy. So trying to figure out how you do that in that context is hard. But if we had the full powers of independence, we'd be able to make progress on those areas as well, which would be hugely helpful to Scotland.
Let me ask you a fairly fundamental question, which I ask most people who are on the show, Ivan, and it's this. In your view, where does sovereignty lie in Scotland?
Well, sovereignty lies with the people.
The Scottish people?
Yes. Yeah.
And when somebody says, no, sovereignty lies with the Crown and Parliament, what is your answer to that?
Well, I think it was Kenyon Wright that said, when somebody says, we are the government, and we say, no, the answer is, well, we are the people, and we say yes. So I think that that's the fundamental premise of it. Clearly delivering on that, there's steps to go through to get to where we need to get to. But at the end of the day, I think that that's a clear answer to the question, is that sovereignty, as far as Scotland's concerned, doesn't lie with the Crown or with any Parliament. It lies with the Scottish people.
And what do you think ought to happen if the Scottish Parliament decrees that there ought to be a referendum in, say, 2023 or 24 or whatever, and the UK government steadfastly says no?
Well, that direction is clear, and First Minister's committed to that. 2023 is when we intend to have the referendum. There's steps that need to be gone through to get us in the position where we get the UK government to agree to that. But that is something that we're unwavering in our commitment to deliver. There's only so long that they can go and say no for, because politically, all that does is convince people that more and more people look at that scenario and say that independence is the right answer. It puts people off supporting the union. It's counterproductive from their point of view, and I think that's clear. So we'll use all the levers that are available to be able to get us to the place where that referendum happens. Convinced it'll happen and convinced we'll win it.
It is interesting. I mean, there was a poll this week by JL Partners, which said that if there was an election soon, the Tories would lose all their seats in Scotland, as well as all their seats in Wales. So the Tory wish to be a one-nation party would have been met.
Yeah,
unfortunately, that nation wouldn't have been the UK; it would just be England.
England, yeah. That's absolutely.
They would have achieved their goal of a one-nation, one-nation party. It does suggest, anyone reading this, it would suggest to them that if there are no Tory MPs in Scotland and there are no Tory MPs in Wales, on what moral basis could anyone deny the peoples in either of those countries a choice about their own constitutional future?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that's a very possible scenario whenever the next UK general election is held, and obviously we've been there in the past when there was no Tory MPs in Scotland, so that wouldn't be a new scenario, but it would further undermine their position that they would stand in the way of the Scottish people deciding their own future.
But nonetheless, it sounds like that's what they plan to do. They plan to say not no, because morally, ethically, you can't say no, because then you have to decide. You then get into the debate about who's sovereign, and I suspect they don't want to go there. And I would understand that. I wouldn't, if I were in their position, I wouldn't want to go there. I wouldn't want to argue in any forum. It wouldn't be the courts, because you're talking about a moral issue rather than a legal issue. And since the UK Constitution is unwritten,
yes, indeed,
or more precisely uncodified, it means that it would be open season.
Yeah,
and the courts wouldn't be a great deal of value to you, because all the courts could say is that sovereignty, as far as we're concerned, is vested in the Crown and Parliament, and therefore this debate is void. Unfortunately, that would not meet the moral case. In fact, it would undermine it. It would then be seen as the law undermining the moral authority of the Scottish people, which would be a very dangerous place to go, it seems to me. But having said that, Boris Johnson is well used to going to dangerous places. He went to Poland recently and told them what he was going to do about Ukraine. But nonetheless, here we are, a situation where he could well refuse to recognise. In fact, he has already done so. He's refused. The very fact that he acts the way he does, it would suggest to anyone watching that he does not accept the argument that the Scottish people are sovereign in any way, shape or form. And that's going to be a very difficult discussion, it seems to me, because these two positions are diametrically opposed.
Yes, I mean, these well-rehearsed arguments, that's clear. But at the end of the day, as I said, the right to make that decision lies with the Scottish people. That's been demonstrated time and time again through election results in Scotland, and it's, I think, counterproductive for the UK government to continue to argue that case as we move forward. I mean, COVID put a lot of that, obviously, to one side for a period of time because of the situation we were in. But I think that we've emerging from that now, we're back to having these arguments and arguing very strongly that Scotland should, in the very near future, have the right to decide on its future. And as I say, we've got the mandate to do that. We've always said that having the referendum during the middle of COVID didn't make sense. But as I say, we're beyond that now, and the focus is very clearly on making that referendum happen and take the steps we need to take to ensure that people of Scotland have their say. And I'm convinced, and I'm sure you are, that from where we are now, independence will be the choice.
Yeah. We're almost through, and I'm very grateful to you, Ivan, because you spent a lot of quality time tonight talking about stuff that I think a lot of people are interested in, and I appreciate that very much. Because we're almost at the end, are there any final points you would like to make? Is there anything you feel that we ought to have covered that we haven't done? Or is there anything that we've covered and you feel, actually, it would have been better to have added this and that?
Well, I think, to my mind, the biggest issue is around about ambition and confidence. The more we do to strengthen Scotland's economy, to have more people that are confident enough to start their own business, to have the rolling out the economic planning support is great opportunities in the industries of the future. The more we talk about the good things that are in Scotland, the more it gives people, the more ambition we've got for Scotland and the people of Scotland, the more it gives people the confidence to vote for independence. So I think that message is fundamentally important. People need to understand that Scotland can more than afford to pay its own way in the world. We can be at least as successful as our near neighbours in Scandinavia and small countries in Europe who are much more successful than us at the moment, with far fewer resources and talent than we have, because they're not shackled by a Westminster government that's looking to its own interests and not to ours. So getting that message across is really what it's all about, and everything we do in government every day to make things better for the people of Scotland is about delivering on that ambition.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Well, I really appreciate you being with us. Our time's almost up, and I need to make a few concluding remarks. But if you're able to stick around for a couple of minutes afterwards, Ivan, that would be much appreciated. Well, there we are, everyone. Another great show. We make it our policy here on the TNT show to bring you the people who are really interesting, who have fascinating things to tell us. Tonight, I learned a lot. I'm rather upset that we've had to do it through this forum, because that would have been the icing on the cake. But we actually got the cake tonight because, frankly, a lot of the stuff that Ivan was talking about, I suspect many of you were completely unaware of as I was. So I'm very appreciative. There's a lot of stuff going on there in the Scottish government. If you take a different view, by all means, get in touch and we can talk about that. You're very welcome to come and join us if that's how you feel. A big thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. As ever, we've got a formidable list of guests lined up for the future shows. Go to the www.whatson Guide Scot or go to the indielive.net and you'll find all the details there. and you'll see that it's very considerable. We've got former Green MPs coming up. We've got leaders of the Green Party in England and Wales. We've got a whole raft of folks, a number of SNP MPs, including Tommy Shepherd. And next week, we have Firebrand Tommy Sheridan on the show. So you don't want to miss that. If you have questions for Tommy, please submit them and we'll try and cover as many as we can. And also, please look out for my column in the Sunday National this weekend. You'll find it in the 7 Days supplement. I'll be dealing with Ukraine, Russian money, and the Tories, and so much more besides. Thank you again for joining us. I hope you'll join us next Wednesday. And remember, it's been a great day for British democracy. A poll this week shows that the Tories are on course to lose all their seats in Scotland and Wales. And as I said with Ivan, they wish to be a one-nation party. Well, they got what they wanted. Oh, and before I go, very briefly, I repeat my invitations. James Cook of the BBC, come on the show, James. You're the Scotland editor. Tell us how you plan to edit Scotland's news. Coming up next, Scotonomics. Don't miss it. You'll regret it if you do. Join us next week and stay safe. Good night, everyone.